I appreciate stories like this one in the Bible. It actually brings me comfort to know that people who I generally view as being brave, bold, and fearless, like the disciples, actually get scared from time to time. They get scared at what's going on in the world around them, and even by what Christ is doing sometimes. Jesus sometimes scares these guys. It's comforting to me to know that these people who had Jesus in their lives in a way that I can only imagine still struggled with situations that they found themselves in. And they didn't always understand what Christ was doing or who exactly he was. Here they mistake him as a ghost as they struggle against the storm they find themselves in. And they become afraid at the very sight of him. They think he's a ghost. Now, we could take the story literally and accept it for what it is and marvel at Jesus that he can do things like walk on water and just stop there. But I think that there's something else going on here, and I think that the story actually speaks directly into what it means to live life as a Christian in the world that we live in today. Because sometimes, maybe more than we care to admit, life can be a struggle. And there can be times where we find ourselves struggling, and we don't always recognize then what Christ is doing. And sometimes, what we find Christ doing in our lives can be scary to us. Even though we might know Jesus, and we know that he's working in our lives somehow and in some way, as Christians, we still find ourselves in scary and in hard situations. And even though we trust God and trust then that God has a plan for us, just like the disciples here in this boat, we can find ourselves struggling against the harsh winds of this world. And we can find ourselves afraid of what we see coming at us. But just like the disciples in the story as well, sometimes we find that what is approaching us isn't some ghost or something to be afraid of like we initially thought. But it could be God acting in our world. It could be Christ calling into our lives, reminding us to take heart and to not be afraid. Sometimes the struggles and the fears that we face in our lives lead us into deeper relationship and a deeper understanding of both God and God's plan for us. I have this friend from a different area of my life, meaning that they're not involved in this church in any way. And she's one of the most incredible people I know. You wouldn't know it by looking at her, but her life hasn't been and isn't right now very easy. Some of this is my speculation, and if she ever catches wind of this sermon and I'm wrong, I'll apologize for it now in case she hears it. But I feel like sometimes she feels like she's trapped. I know that things in her life didn't work out how she planned, which that happens to a lot of us. But the struggles that she's having to deal with, well, they're extremely hard struggles. They're the kind of struggles that break most people. They're the kind of struggles that I think would be probably enough to break me. I'd probably just give up, give in, give over to the idea that the storms of this life were just going to be the way things were going to be. I can imagine in many ways that her life is pretty scary some days. But I talked to her the other day, and here this lady who was a high school dropout at one point, who had a pretty rough past and a pretty rough present. Here this lady who could have just given up is now actually working on getting her doctorate degree in a subject that she loves, in a subject that she's passionate about. And she has a plan, she told me, of changing this world through one person at a time. She's not simply just accepting her situation or rolling over and playing dead, but she's working hard then to improve her life and move herself and her children out of some very difficult situations. She didn't tell me this, but I imagine that it's got to be scary for her. Change is scary and hard no matter how good and how necessary that change is. Now, I believe, and I'm pretty sure that she believes, that the road that she's about to take is one that God put her on. I believe that God has his hand on her life, and God is taking care of her. But big choices and big decisions that can impact our lives and thrust us into unknown waters where the outcome is anything but certain is a terrifying experience for anyone. And so I asked her one time while we were talking, I said, what keeps you going? I wanted to know how someone who's been through the hardships and struggles that she's facing, how a person finds the courage and the strength to keep going. And she told me something that as a minister, I felt that I should have already known or realized in my own life, but it was something I'd never thought of. She told me that every day she wakes up and she's determined to find something she loves about life that day. This woman who faces challenges and struggles in her daily life that I don't even want to imagine, wakes up every day determined to find love in every day. She looks through the storms and the ghosts that she faces in this life, and she sees Jesus calling into her boat, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." She doesn't let life or circumstances or her fears beat her down or define who she is. She works through them to see Christ, to find love, to make her life and the lives of other people better. When I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu last November, I did it for one reason. I was in the absolute worst shape of my life, and my friend John, who is a pastor and a spiritual mentor, told me that by doing it, it would help me in many different areas of my life. He runs a jiu-jitsu school that he does ministry out of in California. And so, like an idiot, I trusted my good friend John with this. I had no idea. I didn't have any clue what Brazilian jiu-jitsu was when I walked into the academy for the first time. And when I saw what actually it was, what I just signed up for, it absolutely terrified me. It's basically full contact submission wrestling, which means that the person that you're going against is trying to do one of two things, either choke you or break something on your body. I decided that the threat of heart disease and diabetes and how I felt physically in that moment in November was scarier than what I was looking at going on in front of me. Since that first class, I've gone from the worst shape that I've ever been in my life to the best shape of my life right now. I went from being 223 pounds to right around 180 this morning. None of my clothes fit, but I'm in the best shape of my life right now. It's come at a cost. I've pulled my groin muscle. I tore a muscle in my back horribly. One ear is starting to get thicker than the other because I lead with that side of my head. I had a hole busted in the corner of my mouth that went all the way through my mouth because I caught the knee of an ER doctor while we were wrestling. I have sore muscles in places I didn't even know muscles existed on my body, and my body is almost constantly bruised. One night, Isaac came into my room, my 9-year-old, whose favorite day is the last day of school. And he saw me taking off my shirt as I was getting ready to get in the shower after class, and he looked at my body and he asked me if I'd been in a car accident recently. Trust me, there are easier ways than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to lose weight, and I've stopped recommending it to my friends that they come and check out the class because it really isn't for everyone. I keep going back, though, for a few reasons. One reason is it's an incredible stress reliever. You have to be entirely in the moment. If somebody is trying to choke you, you can't be thinking about work that day or all the things you have to do or the troubles at home or the stresses of children. You have to be entirely in that moment. Another reason I keep going back is that I'm learning that I'm a lot tougher than I thought I was. I get destroyed on the mat constantly. But somehow I'm learning to push through it, to get back up, to try again, that no matter how hard it is, no matter how badly it may hurt, no matter how worn out I may feel or how beat up I am, I can still have one more round and one more battle in me. I'm learning that I'm resilient, that I can bounce back, that I can handle stress and pressure better than I ever thought I could. I'm learning that if I breathe and relax, I can think more clearly in difficult and stressful and uncomfortable situations. I'm learning that I can overcome my fears and my struggles. I'm learning to handle life better. And jiu-jitsu is teaching me physical lessons that are translating into spiritual disciplines in my life. But the one reason I keep going back, that pushes me into that class and on those mats, even when I'm tired and I don't want to go, the one reason that picks me up after injury and being crushed is this: my children. Isaac asked me why I keep doing it. Why, if I keep getting so beaten up and bruised, do I keep doing jiu-jitsu? I told him I want to be a champion. I want to fight in a tournament, and I want to win it someday. I want to show my kids what it takes and what it means to be a winner in this life. And as corny as it sounds, there's a scene from the movie Rocky Balboa, which is Rocky 6, if anyone's keeping count. I think we're on 375 at this point. But Rocky is going back to fight in his 50s. His wife Adrian has died from cancer. His son has grown up to resent him and resent being a Balboa. But Rocky still wants to fight one last time. And his son shows up at this restaurant that Rocky owns to try and stop him. And Rocky then says this to him: I look around this world, and I see what a scary place it is we've made it out to be sometimes. I see all the struggles that ordinary people face just in their daily lives. And I know that one day, my kids will have to face challenges and fears that they aren't equipped for. I know that they may get knocked down by life like I have from time to time. That things don't always work out. That dreams don't always come true. That sometimes life feels more like a storm and they'll be afraid of the challenges that they face. I know that it'll happen to them because it happens to me. It happens to all of us. But I want to show them that some things are worth fighting for. I want to show them that no matter how big the fear, no matter how large the opponent, no matter how beaten down you get, sometimes it's worth it to pick yourself up and keep going. That as long as you're alive, you've got a little bit more fight left in you. I want my kids to know that it's okay to be scared sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you stop moving forward, that courage is moving through your fears. It doesn't mean that you don't have them. Courage means you work through those fears. Part of me feels like I have something I need to prove to my kids. Another part of me feels like I have to prove it to myself. And another part of me still maybe feels like I have to prove it to all of you. That the fear that is propagated and profited off of in this world right now should not have the final word to the Christian about how we live and how we act in this world. And it shouldn't hold us back from doing the right things and treating other people with the dignity that they deserve. That we as Christians cannot operate out of fear. We cannot let this world beat us down. We have to operate out of courage, courage that comes with faith, courage that moves us through fear, courage that trusts Jesus when he says, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Sometimes we, like many churches out there, run the risk of doing things because we're afraid that we won't exist anymore. And it happens. Churches close. Statistics say 72 churches close each week. 72 churches are having their last Sunday right now. 72 churches are closing after worship today. And so we do things then just to try and attract new people in order to keep our doors open because we're afraid of being one of the 72. We're afraid of dying. And we can look at those numbers and statistics then and say that church and Christianity is on decline in this country. But what people never tell you, what you never see reported, and if statistics are to be trusted, then that means 77 churches this Sunday are celebrating their first Sunday, opening up to be brave new witnesses to Jesus Christ in this world. Because there is a desire in this world for new ministry, for a new way of looking at things and considering how we live in this world. There is a desire for a place and a community that has the courage to push forward a message of hope and of grace and of love despite all the things in this world that are telling us that we have to be afraid. So many voices want to tell us all that we have to fear. Terrorists and politicians and mosquitoes and weather and disease and even each other. You could turn on the news this evening and hear things like toilet paper, which you don't know may kill you, and all sorts of other garbage and fear-mongering. But here we are gathered together, worshiping and following a man who dies on a cross. And he's telling us not to be afraid. That the good guys win. That light beats the darkness. That the storms and the winds we face in this life aren't enough to sink the ship if we trust in him. Jesus tells us no matter how hard life knocks us down, no matter how badly we get beat up, no matter how scary things may seem, that we as Christians then need to get up and keep fighting and keep hoping and keep going and keep having courage, because if we listen to him and if we follow him, things will get better. Jesus tells us not to give in to the voices of fear, but to live with the courage and faith that brings us new life in the face of death. I know you people. I know this church. I know this community. And I know that right now we face some challenges. I know that some of them seem hard and some of them seem scary. I know that right now we're in a time of transition and change, and I know transition and change are scary things just by their nature. But I know that this isn't a place, and you aren't a people who will let fear get the upper hand on us. Because what we have here is worth fighting for. What we have here is worth the struggle. And if we can move forward with a bold new witness and a bold new ministry, trusting that Jesus is climbing in the boat, saying to us, "Take heart, have no fear, it is I," it's going to make all the difference in the world to this church. But it isn't just about this church. This community and this country and this world are worth fighting for too. And if we can gather here and have courage with the ministry that we do here with this church, then we can show others who are afraid in this life what courage looks like, what it takes and what it means to be winners. That this community, this country, and this world are worth all the beatings, all the bruises, and all the crosses it may take to show them that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. But we, you and I, have to be the example to others of what courage through faith looks like in a world built around fear right now. If we want to be the shining city on the hill, then it starts here with us, with Christians who refuse to operate and live out of a narrative of fear. No one is going to do it for us. It's up to us to change the narrative. It's up to us to wake up every morning looking for the love in this life. It's up to us to show people that courage means moving forward despite the storms, despite the ghosts, despite our fears. It's up to us to show others what it looks like and what it means to be winners in this life. It's up to us to fight for others who can't fight for themselves. It's up to us to hear Christ calling into this boat. Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Amen.